challenges for you today. First image on Monday. Do you remember how bright the sun was? There was a number of things inside on Monday morning into the afternoon, and I thought, the sun is shining so bright, it's time to be outside. I mean, we're talking the bright of put on your sunglasses, get out the baseball hat to shade your eyes. That bright that it was. We take that brightness, the end of the first reading, the end of that prophecy. It said, light to the nations. In our case, it would be light to the city of Manitowoc, to open the eyes of the blind, to bring out prisoners from confinement, and from the dungeon those that live in darkness. So our challenge with that bright light of Monday and the bright sun, especially in these days, I mean, since Christmas, the days have been getting more and more daylight, but still as we recognize in some ways that depriving of that light, to be challenged by that light in our life, to be open to that Christmas light of Jesus being the light in the darkness of our lives. For those that are challenged with depression or sadness on days of low lighting, especially that sense of recognizing that light of Christ shining so brightly. Or if you're from Alaska, you're in the days now that are some of the longest nights of the year and shortest daylights of the year. I remember being there years ago in June, and the light, you know, the day went for like 20 hours of daylight, just way too much. Not really, but that sense of that light in our life. So with that sense of light, I want to challenge us. Where in our world do we need the light of Christ shining brightly? I've especially on a general sense been praying for that light as we've been going through the steps of parish planning and preparing for our parish annual meeting and where we're going from here, that the light of Christ be part of our parish. The light of Christ also a part of our lives. As we look deep in our lives and recognize again that prophecy about the prisoners in confinement. What part of us is confined? What's the darkness in our life? Perhaps it's sin, perhaps it's doubt, that we need today to invite the light of Christ into a deeper and a wider way. And so as we celebrate this Feast of the Baptism, as we recognize the light of Christ in the world, where is it that we need that bright light most now in our lives? So that's number one, recognizing that bright light is for us. Number two is, that was such a nice Monday that I went for a walk along the shore of Lake Michigan. And there's a spot up near the Y where there's rocks like fist size that are tossed up onto the lawn and onto the sidewalk. And there was a visitor to Manitowoc staying in the hotel, and he said, where did these rocks come from? Well, they came from Lake Michigan. Perhaps as part of the ice shelf, but mostly because of the action of the water and the force being so much that it's popping not just little twigs and branches, but logs and stones the size of the fist can force that up out of the water and onto the shore and even onto the sidewalk there. What great power is in the midst of that water. Great power to pop that up and to bring that alive in life. And as we recognize that role of that water and the pitch of that water, bringing that up and being a part of us, we want to recognize a piece of that as the waters of baptism. As we sprinkled this morning, a couple of you ducking away, I worry about our songbooks. We really shouldn't get them wet. We should really stop using them. I would bet there's at least two of you that wished you'd have brought your umbrella in this morning. Am I not right? And if I don't do that sprinkling right, you can get a whole thing of water on you. But in that sense of that water popping up that rock, we recognize that water popping up whatever in our life from inside of us. Again, that opening and that force to open up and to let whatever's in out. What is in our water of our life from our baptism that we want to let go in our life? What is the sin that we perhaps need to pitch out of our lives? What is that keeps us from truly being free? What is the weight that weighs us down in our life? That's what we want to let that baptism water just pitch out of our lives. So that's the image of number two, is that being washed out inside of us. We're letting in the light and we're washing out that darkness out of us. And so take a moment to name what that difficult or sin or difficulty is that we need to let washed out. And as we name that, then we also want to recognize the force of the water of Lake Michigan hitting the shoreline and coming up. It even comes up so well that the water can sprinkle the roundabout. You've been through our new roundabout there? The water is with enough force, it can come up and even reach that roundabout from there. And so I ask the waters of baptism in our lives as we're baptized and we're living that in life, are our waters enough to be up and spray out over the lives into the world in which we live, in our homes, in our work, in our schools, in any part of our lives? Are we living our baptism such that it's just popping out and all over the place in our life and in our world? Are we really letting that water go, or are we containing it? And that's our challenge today on this Feast of the Baptism, not to put up the umbrella to block the water, but to be the one that's forcing the water up and out. That as the dove appeared over Jesus and said, "This is my beloved Son," we too in our baptism, we are beloved children of God. And as such, we need to share that water of grace and peace and love and forgiveness in our world. And so as we recognize that call, we ask ourselves, where do we think this week is the hardest place to share the waters of baptism? The words of the love of Christ, that which we want to splash out on us to others. That place, that person, that thing, we want to name that so we can bring that to prayer also today, to have that courage to be about boldly living our baptism and sharing that water in the world. So again, as we leave today, recognize the sun. Sun shining so bright, not just the S-U-N, the S-O-N of Jesus Christ in our life, shining so bright that it's clearing the darkness within us. And that the waters of baptism are so churned in us, it's kicking out whatever is sin, whatever it is that we need to let go of. And then as it does that, it also spreads that water to wherever we need it in our life and in our world. And if we're doing that, we're living our baptism in life. So take a moment to name those areas, to prepare to bring those to prayer. We invite the family for the baptism to come forward.